Hello and welcome to Agastya, Purpose of Life, translations from the sacred book of Agastya Valipadu. Before we begin, we'll go ahead and read the prayer, which is an invocation to Sage Agastya. Om. The one who is manifest as the foremost in the letter A, the sage who is the highest among the living beings manifested in the letter U, dispelling the illusion of life as the letter Ma, and thus is blessing us. That sacred feet of Agastya, let us touch every day. Today's topic is pleasure. And Sage Agastya does a beautiful discourse on this. So he says, pleasure is an emotion that occurs at different times because of different things. There is nothing wrong if man experiences pleasure as required by the five senses to the extent necessary. It is natural to enjoy these things that give pleasure. However, exceeding the limit or needs in seeking pleasure is wrong. Now, let us understand what Appa is saying here. First, he says, pleasure is an emotion that occurs at different times because of different things. So, what does he mean? He's clearly giving us a distinction between pleasure and happiness. Happiness is more connected with a long-term emotional feeling of well-being, but pleasure is more short-term. It is derived from more of the material things that we enjoy. And he says, if there is nothing wrong if man experiences pleasure as required by the five senses to the extent necessary. So Appa is very practical. He's saying it's okay. You want to enjoy something that your five senses need. You want to smell something beautiful, you want to eat something tasty. It's okay, but to the extent necessary. So in this particular word, or the little few words, he's saying, do not exceed that. So, all of us, we are always, intent in getting pleasure. It's part of our life. We want to go eat tasty things all the time. We want to see beautiful things all the time. We want to enjoy nice scents all the time. And Appa saying, enjoy it only to the extent necessary. But if you do that in excess, then that is wrong. So he says, however, exceeding the limit or needs in seeking pleasure is wrong. There is a saying, if one drinks even nectar in excess, it can turn into poison. So what is Appa saying here? Watch out. Even if you drink a nectar in excess, then it will turn to poison, which means if you like something which is like, let us take the most basic thing, food. And we love something that is tasty. And because it is tasty, we keep eating more and more of it. What happens? We have indigestion, we have problems with the stomach. And so Appa is saying, be careful. Do not, indulge too much. You like something, eat it to a limited extent. And then he also says, and if you think about it in other terms also, he's talking about whatever we do in terms of pleasure, say there are some people who like to do bad things to derive pleasure, like bad things that are negative, have negative effect on their bodies and their family, like alcoholism. So those things would not be conducive to a happy life, because that kind of pleasure which you derive from something which has a negative effect on your body and your family and your well-being will only bring unhappiness. Thank you, Dr. Sudhamani, for joining us. We are now at the stage where Appa is saying, however, exceeding the limit or needs in seeking pleasure is wrong. There's a saying, if one drinks even nectar in excess, it can turn into poison. So you can please continue with after that.
Akka, sorry for that. Actually, I'm not getting the book in that way. Can you please send me the pages?
It's all right then. I'll just go ahead and continue reading today. Pleasure is something that one derives from getting something that one desires. So what is it that we are seeking? It's usually when we look at something and we want it, then when we get it, we have pleasure. But then when we understand that when we get it, we get pleasure, then we also understand that when we do not get it, we are angry, upset, sad. So that is the balance that we have to have. As spiritual aspirants, let us watch what we want, not what we need. Appa saying what you need is okay. And what you want to a small extent is okay. But wanting it in excess is wrong, because all that it will do is make us become totally, involved in getting more and more and more of it. So pleasure itself is an addiction, whether it is pleasure of normal, ordinary life things, unless we are able to say, oh, I tasted this for today. This is enough. I can wait until the next time to taste the same thing later. Or I've experienced doing this particular thing which gives me pleasure, but I don't have to do it all the time. So if we are able to make sure that we put a limit and we are satisfied, that gives us happiness, peace of mind. But if we continuously seek pleasure, which is what many people do, then either they keep having limited time pleasure, they're so involved in it, they forget all the more important things in life. Or there are people who keep seeking it and not getting it, get angry, frustrated. So all that leads to discontentment. So saying this, Appa, Sage Agastya sings, pleasure. For the tongue, sweetness is pleasure. For the nose, fragrance of a flower is pleasure. For the ears, music is pleasure. For the skin, touching is pleasure. For the sensual man, sex is pleasure. For the yogi, remembering God is pleasure. For a tired laborer, sleeping is pleasure. For some, provoking others is pleasure. Now, it continues, but let us go back and look at each line here. For the tongue, sweetness is pleasure. Let us think about it. Any person who's living in this world, they may, grow old, they may go through different experiences, but the one thing, desire that remains till the end of their life is food, taste. Even the greatest of yogis, even Yogananda says, before he died, he had a desire to drink tender coconut water, the green coconut water. And he said, Divine Mother made sure that he got it. So for us, the final, even spiritual aspirants, that is one of the final barriers, because we still want to experience the taste, something that goes into our body. It comes back to the very primal thing of survival of and finding pleasure in intaking of food. So then he says, for the nose, fragrance of a flower is pleasure. So we all like scents. It's always nice to have scents. But what is conversely that is happening is we get repelled by something that does not smell good. So as a yogi, we must go beyond that, go to an extent where we are able to handle everything, to train ourselves to handle everything. I mean, if you look at people who work in certain industries where there's in the cruise ship, they were saying that there's a place where they recycle human waste. And the engineer who actually works there, who's very well paid, he says, the smell is bad, but over in the time as he works there, he gets used to it. So as yogis, we begin to start stopping that discrimination, or finding pain and pleasure, or trying to find only pleasure, or being repelled by something that we do not like. So we have to start getting balance. Then he says, for the ears, music is pleasure. Now in music, what are the different kinds of music we have? We have all kinds. We have the rap, we have loud rock music and those things. But think about how sound actually affects all of us. Sound is very powerful, because they say when creation happened, it was the sound of Om that was all pervading, that began the whole process of creation. So sound is extremely important in human life. That is why we have what is called mantras, where we chant something and it has power because of the intent and the pronunciation of the sound, or just the power of the sound. That is why in ancient India we even had great musicians who were able to create rain by the power of the sound of a certain raga. That is why we even have ragas or tunes, musical tunes, which are called Mega Malhar or Deepaka Raga, where the light just lights when somebody sings. And this was happening because they had that power, that pure intention, and that pure intonation, all that helped create the change in energy. So if you look at sound, it's a very powerful energy. That's why, as spiritual aspirants, we should try not to use bad words, swear words. They create an ugly energy. We do not want that in our lives. So one of the things that Gajraj Swamigal ever did was never used a bad word, not one. So in our home, there was no bad word, and that is simple but so important. Make sure your children do not hear bad words. They do not need to hear that. They do not need to say it. I have seen people, even in big positions in the society, who use bad words as a matter of fact. It is not good. Those things have bad vibrations. Do not use it. Just as something good makes us happy, something good in excess can make us bad. Everything is energy. So sound is energy. So let us try to listen to music that is conducive to us. For example, when you get up in many traditional homes, we have divine music playing in the background, devotional music. That creates an atmosphere. It's important. When we go into meditation, we start doing bhajans or singing songs. That is important because it's impossible to feel at peace when you have loud music blaring at you, when the music is discordant. In fact, discordant tune is not, or sound is not music. What people are listening to as music is not really music, because music has to be present. It has to create a sense of something, emotion, bring out an emotion in you. Most of this hard rock does not do that. It's just noise put together in a form of music. Then there is the question of, he says, for the eyes, colorful things are pleasure. We like to see and look at nice things. And, in our olden ages, in the traditional homes, we had our parents telling pregnant women, surround yourself with beautiful pictures, beautiful thoughts, beautiful words, and listen to nice things. That is very important. Why is that? A pregnant woman, what she sees, what she experiences, has an effect on the fetus. That is why we have stories of Abhimanyu, or we have stories of Prahalada, who were in the womb and they learned a lot of great things because their mothers were listening to those things. So this is something that we can all practice in our own household. Try to create a happy, beautiful, divine atmosphere. How can we do that? With the pictures we have around us, with the music that we play, with the way we talk to each other, and the way we address our children. What we expose our children to is very, very important. Even if we have already passed the stage where we have already had a children and we cannot expose them to good things when they are in a womb, it's important then, now at least, externally expose them to good, sublime things. Then he says, for the skin, touching is pleasure. Same thing. We want to touch nice things. We are repelled by something which is not nice. And then for the sensual man, sex is pleasure. Here again, there are excesses in this in a lot of people around the world, because now Western culture has unfortunately brought this very important private thing between a husband and wife into the open. It has created an entire generation that does not understand the whole idea of why this has been created by God, or what is the requirement, why is this being done. to procreate. That's the main thing, to bring beautiful other divine souls into the world. But unfortunately, we have lost track of it. We get lost in that sensual pleasure. And even as people grow old, they forget that they're old, their body doesn't function, but their mind still wants it. So they're still caught in that quagmire or that mire of sensual pleasure. So, as spiritual aspirants, let us understand we are past the time where children are born. They're already, we have completed that part of our life. Let us have moderation. Even Yogananda says moderation, even between a husband and wife, is important. And there's nothing wrong in it. Because the more we think about those things and do it, indulge in such things, we are going to forget all the other things that are important in life, especially for spiritual aspirants. For a yogi, remembering God is pleasure. So there's a distinction here. Just remembering God for a yogi is pleasure, but it is not complete bliss and happiness that comes from actually dwelling in the thought of God, in being in the thought of God throughout the day. That is a different state. Then comes, for a tired laborer, sleeping is pleasure. Now, Vappa is talking about two diametrically opposite things. One is a yogi, another is a laborer who has no time to think of God, who's not aware of these things, who goes to the temple when he is free, and that is all there is to it. But for him, after he's worked a long day, just sleeping is pleasure. And for some, provoking others is pleasure. Now, Vappa is again being very naughty in this. He's saying, many are the people who like to provoke others. They find pleasure in it. They like to talk about something. They know, okay, if I say this, that person is going to get upset. And they enjoy that. That is a very sad state of human affairs. But as yogis, we can, as spiritual aspirants, we can go beyond all that. We can try not to provoke others, but only create happiness through our interactions with others, happiness and peace. And that is within our power. We can do that. Next, he says, and he continues singing, like this, there are many things that give pleasure, but that which gives happiness is, remember, we talked about happiness, which is more an emotional state, which is more long lasting. He says, consumption to a suitable extent is pleasure. Loving the beauty of something without touching it is pleasure. Praying to God and attaining samadhi is pleasure. For your wife, decorating the goddesses is pleasure. So he is now talking about more, in terms of experiencing more sublime things or more beautiful things, and also about limiting it. So he says, consumption to a suitable extent is pleasure. When somebody has reached a stage where they do not want too much of something, where they're able to say, I am satisfied with this little morsel that I got, that is pleasure. That gives happiness. Loving the beauty of something without touching it is pleasure. So we go see something. The first thing we want to do is bring it home. We want to buy something that looks like it and bring it home. We want to touch it. So Appa says, if you see something beautiful, if you see somebody who's got something more beautiful than you, enjoy it and leave it at that. Be happy for that person. If something is out there which is beautiful, enjoy it there and let it go. Come back home empty-handed, because the more you let go of these things, the more content and peace you'll have. Loving the beauty of something without touching it is pleasure. Praying to God and attaining samadhi is pleasure. That is really, truly happiness, when we are able to, pray to God, go into meditation, focus on it, dwell on it, and through all our efforts, reach the state of samadhi, which is total contentment and bliss. And then he says, for your wife, decorating the goddesses is pleasure. How many of us, here he's talking about Arultai Vijayalakshmi, because every Friday she would pray to God and she enjoyed the idea of decorating God. It's not wrong. I mean, if in the beginning of our life, if we want to decorate God and we enjoy that, that is okay. But don't get so engrossed in it that you forget the whole idea of why there is an altar in your house or why you're going to a temple. Because the God is more important than the decoration. Decoration gives us pleasure. Decorating God gives us pleasure, but knowing God, understanding the power of God, connecting to the divine consciousness gives us more happiness and permanent happiness. The pleasure that increases love, the pleasure that gives peace, the pleasure that leads to contentment, that is paradise. He says, what is paradise? Paradise is here on earth. You feel paradise. He's not saying paradise as a place, paradise as a feeling, as a state of being when something that you do that is so beautiful, helping somebody that increases love, something that you do to another being that increases love in you and the other person, the pleasure that gives peace, that action or thought or something that gives you peace. When you have experienced something and you have say, this is enough, I'm happy that I've had, when you're feeling content with what you've been given in life, that leads to contentment. And that itself is paradise. When you look at yourself as a person who's happy with the way things are in your life, then that is contentment. And that is paradise here on earth. When you no longer have any desires, when you no longer need something or want something or are frustrated about not getting something, you come to that state of peace and contentment. And that is the state of paradise in yourself. Excessive pleasure of the body and mind will only result in suffering, he says. So Appa here is again warning us. Do not have excessive, pleasure or indulge in excessive pleasure of body and mind, because that will always lead to suffering. So when we are spiritual aspirants, let us understand what is it that we desire and how much of it can we enjoy and where we can we say, okay, this is enough. Once we do that, we will start going to the next level of contentment and peace in our lives. Any thoughts or about this? Dr. Sudhamani, Brother Ramchandran, Ramesh, Veena? Okay, we will finish with Dr. Sudhamani had something to say?
Nothing, Akka. I was just thinking why it is so difficult to control the taste, especially because, as you told, old age people are, even in spite of being diabetic and all, they want to taste something.
Yes.
And why is it? Because it is the primal one?
Yes, because of the
Or
very fact it's a very primal thing. Yeah, you're right about that. You hit the point. It's very primal in us. Food sustains us, but we also have something called the taste. So the tongue, wants tasty food. But unfortunately, as you know, most of the tasty food is not good for us, like sugar, for example. But even diabetics, people who are, old, they still want to eat. And even if they don't have teeth, they want to eat something that's hard. And so, things like diabetes or things that happen to our body helps us understand that it is okay to sustain life without, indulging in pleasures of the tongue. It is hard. It's one of the last things that goes in a human aspirant, because all of us are guilty of that. I am guilty of that too. I like tasty things too. But we can slowly begin to withdraw our mind, pratyahara, that's what they say, withdrawing from our senses. So withdrawing from our senses doesn't happen just in meditation or during meditation. It happens every moment of our life. Can we, as spiritual aspirants, challenge ourselves to start looking at things that give us pleasure and begin to withdraw from the senses? That is one of the biggest challenges for all of us. And let us try that. I have tried in a particular period of my life where I went into a very bland diet, where I wouldn't even drink anything like coffee, tea, nothing. I was actually very, very healthy and happy at that time. Then again, I fell back into the normal life, because of life circumstances also, and because things changed for me. But I know that it is possible. I would like to go back to that too. But it is, let us say, among all the evils or things that will hold us back, this is one of the least, because there are other more major things we need to address first. So we can, as spiritual aspirants, experience and enjoy a little bit this. Okay, that's okay. Let's learn to begin with, let's stop at this. Let me stop at one piece of chocolate instead of eating a whole bar, or let me stop with one piece of fruit. If we can start that, we can, at a later stage, develop the idea of eating what is available and not worrying about what you're going to eat next. So, any other thoughts?
Thank you.
Okay, so we will finish. Brother Ramchandran, go ahead.
Paramacharya of Kanchi, he used to sometimes take from devotee. They used to bring, so he likes it and all that. To satisfy them, he used to take. And after 2 days, he will not take any food. He used to say, I should not take anything which tongue wants.
Beautiful.
Like that.
See, that is a great example. That's a great example. We can do that. If we indulge in something, but he did it not for himself, but he did it for the pleasure of the devotee, that was more sublime. But if we indulge in something, maybe that's something we can learn to kind of control ourselves in the next 2 days. So let us look at everything that we do today and going forward, what we see, what we experience through our 5 senses, and how we can say, okay, this is enough. Let us start practicing that. That would be a beautiful thing to learn from Agastya through this topic that we have discussed today. So before we end, let me finish with the prayer. Shri Agastya Arati Mantra. Om Vedanta Purusha Jnana Guna Shekara Vande 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 Jnanapalaka Om Dharmapalaka Dharmarakshaka Om Shri Agastya Mahamuni Prabhuve Sharanam Sharanam Sharanam